Hey everybody, it's the Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig, joined as always by Andrew, except today I am not joined by Andrew. We are on our Thanksgiving holiday. I'm going to go ahead and cut up our discussion about Deafheaven's Lonely People with Power from back in April. It will be another record that we will be talking about a lot during the end of the year and the best records of the year. So I hope you enjoy revisiting this record from back when it was super, super fresh in our minds. We appreciate you checking out the podcast wherever you check it out on YouTube. That's the place where we've been growing the most, and we're very grateful for all of you for listening to this podcast week in and week out and enjoying whatever it is about our podcast that you enjoy. So we're appreciative of you, and without further ado, here's the discussion about Lonely People with Power. Hello and welcome to another Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig, joined as always by Andrew, and just a couple of fanboys with their Deafheaven t-shirts on for the YouTube audience. How's it going, Andrew?
It's going pretty good. Just a coincidence that I'm wearing the shirt, that I happen to have this little piece of vinyl here. It's all purely coincidence, but I think I've been waiting only 2 months. Like, it feels like Deafheaven announced this album like 6 months ago, but it was really actually only 2 months. I've been waiting, I would say patiently, but that's not true, impatiently, to be able to listen to this album and talk about it. And the day is here. So when you ask, how am I doing? I'm doing pretty great. I'm excited to have this album to finally talk about. How are you?
Great. So here's the real question. If you and I did not like this record, would we do this episode?
Absolutely.
So spoiler alert, I think we both like it.
Yeah. I won't delay my giving that final judgment. I'll just say it up top. When we did the Dark Matter review, I led off with a little bit of a monologue. I'm not going to do that for this, but this feels a lot to me the way Dark Matter felt to me in terms of like reinvigorating some things I had maybe lost a little bit about the band, and really feeling like the album I for sure wanted and maybe even needed from this band without realizing it. And I'm really excited to dig in.
Yeah. All right. I am going to start with a little monologue because I think this band in general needs a bit of a disclaimer. I know that there are a lot of people who are never going to like Deafheaven. My friends who I've introduced this band to, many of them despise this. They don't like it. They don't like the screeching vocals. They can't get past those screeching vocals enough to hear the melodic orchestral rock that I love so much. And
Gee, I don't know anything about that. Oh wait, no, that was me when Sunbather came out.
But yeah, and I don't blame anybody. Anybody who doesn't like Deafheaven, I am not here to try to convince you that you should like Deafheaven. I'm just telling the people who like Deafheaven why I like this record so much and why I love this band so much. But I'm not here to convert anybody. If you don't like it, it's not even me gatekeeping or being elite or anything else. It's fine. You do not have to like Deafheaven. I love them, and skip this entire episode if you don't like them. That's fine. But we're going to go deep on this record. Did I cut out for you for a second?
Nope, you were good. But I am here to convert souls. That's what I'm here for. So get ready for that. No, I mean, look, I'll just to piggyback on that a little bit. Yes, when Sunbather came out, I hated it. My first time listening to Deafheaven, I absolutely hated it, and it was because of the vocals. I didn't get it. I didn't grow up listening to black metal. I was not familiar with the art form. Even like the blast beats was something I wasn't like super familiar with. It was just a lot, like in your face. And to me, I perceived it initially as a lot of noise. And I loved the interludes and the moments when these songs would like morph into different things. I loved that. I could hear it. But then as soon as it would go back into the black metal influences, it would lose me. And so I totally get it why this isn't for everybody. I have since, I think we've talked about this before, but Craig was the one who initially really pushed me to keep giving Sunbather another chance. And this is why, Craig, you should be trying to convert souls, because you saved one soul here. But no, I totally get it. But I do think that if you kind of understand over time what it is that they're doing with that stuff and the way it creates the dynamics within these songs and the textures and the way that the push and the pull, the release, and we're going to talk about a lot of that in this, there is a lot there that I do think you can kind of, latch onto initially. And as you get used to George Clarke's vocals, even those, like, I've grown to absolutely love. I adore George Clarke as a vocalist. What he does, I think, is incredible. But yeah, I'm just piggybacking on what you said. I think it's absolutely fair. The Deafheaven is not for everybody, and we're not here to say this is the best band in the world, but it's one of my absolute favorite bands in the world.
All right, so first things first, we can't talk about this record without talking about Infinite Granite first. And just for everybody who was wondering, you and I asked on the podcast, or wondered aloud on the podcast earlier this year, would this be clean vocal Deafheaven? Would this be a continuation of the Infinite Granite style, where it wasn't growling and heavy and just ludicrously heavy? And in hindsight, it's not. First of all, it's a very, very heavy record. And in hindsight, I guess we probably should have seen that coming with the label switch to Roadrunner Records. Doesn't it all kind of feel silly in hindsight?
It does, but it almost felt too on the nose. Like, it almost kind of seemed like, well, wait, they're not just going to go to Roadrunner and then immediately go back to metal, right? Like, it almost just felt a little too perfect. And, I do, like, I think it's important to understand that with Deafheaven, it's always hard to know what you're going to get, because this is in a day and age in which we know too much about so many of the bands we love. Deafheaven is a band that we know so little about. Are not self-promoters. They don't do a ton of interviews. That, they'll do a couple when an album comes out, but for the most part, like, they still live in that era, like, that we grew up with, where bands were sort of mysterious, and there is a lot of mystery behind Deafheaven, and we don't always know, like especially Kerry McCoy. Like, he is such an interesting persona to me. He's the lead guitarist and main songwriter of the band. I have seen like 2, maybe 3 interviews with him ever. I know almost nothing about him. I don't know what makes him tick. I don't know even necessarily what a lot of his influences are. He is sort of just this nebulous mystery that we're always trying to figure out. And that's why every time they put out an album, you don't really know what direction it's going to go. You just kind of have to guess. And even from some of the teases they did, I think that they played with us a little bit. We got a lot of there are 3 what they call incidental tracks on this that are sort of like these interludes, and they used a lot of those interludes in the teasers early on, which does not necessarily prepare you for what this album is. But so I think it's cool that we didn't know what we were going to get, and that we still are delightfully surprised. And we talked about this last week, the fact they only put out 2 singles ahead of time, which today is unheard of. Like, nobody only puts out 2 songs ahead of time. Like, there were so many things we didn't know about this album going into it, and I really love and appreciate that about this band. As much as, like, as the type of fan I am who digs into like anything I can read about the bands I love, sometimes I'd like to see that curtain pulled back a little bit. George Clarke, the last couple of years, has sort of opened up a lot more, and I've sort of learned a lot about him. But like, Kerry McCoy is still a pretty big mystery to me.
So let's talk about how small this band is first, because as much as you and I love them, one of the themes that we talk about from time to time is how you and I will love a band this much and then kind of find out that their stamp on the world, their imprint on the world, is much, much smaller. In a world where Tool has nearly 5 million monthly listeners on Spotify, Deafheaven has a touch over 400,000. They are, in the world of music, they're kind of niche. They are kind of niche. They're two big singles that they released ahead of time. Magnolia has 938,000 spins on Spotify. Heathen has 727,000. After, not quite a week, we haven't hit 1 million on one track yet. So they're very, very successful in the niche black metal, heavy music world, but they're still a very small band in the scheme of worldwide music listening. They're never going to headline a basketball arena. They're going to be somewhere in the 5th or 6th line of a festival poster at best. But, it doesn't matter. I think this is going to be in contention for your and my top album of the year. I think that it'll be in the running for lots of critic top end of the year lists. But let's dig in. Where do you want to start?
I was going to ask you, like, do we do this track by track or do we jump around?
I think we jump around. Let's talk about the incidentals first, because I think that's a really interesting place to start. The first incidental is the first track on the record, and it's fine. It's a wonderful introduction to the record. It leads into the first song, Doberman, just fine.
It's a scene setter for sure. It has a very ominous vibe to it.
I would never skip it and just start with Doberman.
Absolutely not. It's the perfect lead into Doberman, and if you notice the melody of it, the melodic part, it's not really a vocal, it's a vocal effect. It's distorted and slowed down, but that is actually used in Doberman, but it's sped up as a backing part of that song. But it's very cool how they did that. They were very intentional with the three incidentals. They're all different.
That sound that they used, that style thing that they did using the vocal as an instrument, was reminiscent of stuff they did on Infinite Granite. So
yes, for sure.
It feels like this is the culmination of all the stuff they've ever done, including the last record, even though it sounds nothing like the last record.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did see where they did, I don't know if it was Kerry who said it or George, but one of them pointed out that these were very intentionally placed on this album. They are very intentional in what they were meant to do in the flow of this album. And that's something that Deafheaven's always been very intentional with, is the flow of their albums. Like, there's a reason the songs are all placed where they are on the album. And, you know, like Incidental III, jumping to that one, it's the third to last track. And it
featuring Paul Blanks.
Yeah, the Interpol singer. And that song really is an intro to Winona. It almost doesn't need to be a second track. Like, it is clearly designed to be an intro to Winona, which is the second to last song, and sort of the real climax of this album, I think, is Winona, which we'll get to after this. But so, like, I just think they put a lot of thought into the placement of these. And then obviously, like, I'll let you talk first maybe about Incidental II, which comes in the middle of this album, but that one is very different from the other two incidentals.
Yeah, so Incidental II is honestly one of my favorite songs on the entire record. And so when a band creates kind of an interlude song that is kind of like a palate cleanser, and it ends up just devastating me the way that this one did, it's like this atmospheric, gorgeous vocal melody going on, and then it just breaks into this crushing heaviness that it took me by surprise the first time, gave me absolute chills. It was, it's not just a, hey, we're gonna play the weird calliope music like Tool did on Anima. This is a song, and it's a good song, good piece all by itself. It's just absolutely incredible. And then it leads into Revelator.
The vocals are by Jay Matthews, who I was not familiar with. She's a singer of a electronic group called Boy Harsher, which I guess is pretty popular if you're into electronic music, but I just am not super familiar with it.
Just don't live in that world.
To me, Incidental II is actually terrifying as a song. Like, that was the emotion I felt. And it's important to understand too, you mentioned that it leads into Revelator, which it does a great job of doing, but it comes after Amethyst, which is sort of the heartbeat of this album to me. To me, like, Amethyst is this like pillar in the middle of this album that is just the absolute heart and soul of everything Deafheaven has done in their past, culminated into one song in one moment, and
8 minutes and 14 seconds of perfection.
I think it's the longest song on the album.
It is.
Amethyst is. And then it leads into Incidental, which, as Craig mentioned, starts off just beautifully. I mean, pure beauty. The vocal part that Jay Matthews gives is just incredible. And then all of a sudden, it like just breaks apart and turns into this monstrous, gnarling, not ugly, but just in your face, just haunting, terrifying heaviness. Like, you just feel the weight of that. It's just like, my goodness. And then they just blast that right into Revelator, which is just pure chaos. Like maybe the most aggressive song on this album. I don't know if it's the heaviest, but it's the most, I would say, aggressive. Like Kerry McCoy just going nuts on guitar on Revelator, like just ferocious, fast, in your face. And like, so that you like, if you're going to put Amethyst followed up by Revelator, like you need something to go in the middle of. And they just delivered the perfect song to go in the middle with Incidental II.
Yeah, and I would love a full breakdown of how they created Incidental II. I would the song is 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I would listen to an hour-long podcast of them just talking about the intention and the creation and the placement and all that stuff. I'd love to know like when they thought of it and when they knew that it was going to fit where it fit, or if they created it knowing that they needed to fit something in between the two. Like, I want to know everything about how they put it together.
We do know a little bit. George Clarke talked about it. It was his idea to bring her, Matthews in to do the vocal part. And he mentioned that he didn't mention that if they knew it was exactly the placement on the album, but he knew they had this interlude piece that they needed. And whereas Paul Banks just recorded his part and sent it to them, Jay actually went into the studio with them to work on this. They worked on this all together. And I kind of think that shows, and I'm not downplaying what Paul Banks does, because he really does deliver a really nice, like, spoken word part. And it's, it's a very important poem, I guess, lyrically. George wrote the lyrics to it that Paul read, but it's very important on a personal level to George. And he had mentioned that Paul is one of his favorite artists. So he was actually like nervous to reach out to him to do it. So it's very like, I'm not trying to downplay it, but it was something he just recorded. Where's Interpol from? Are they from England or Ireland?
I have no idea.
They're somewhere overseas. And I think he probably just, recorded it and sent it back to them. But Jay Matthews actually went into the studio and worked on that piece with them.
See, I thought you were wrong. They're from Manhattan, New York.
Really? I thought for sure Interpol was like,
I didn't want to disagree with you because I wasn't sure.
Well, I'm not an Interpol fan, so I take that for what it's worth. I actually very much dislike Interpol, but that's neither here nor there.
I liked one record, but this is not an Interpol podcast. So yeah, it's just so interesting that the incidentals are anything but incidental.
Yeah. You would never skip them if you're listening to this album like there's no impulse to skip them whatsoever.
No. But then again, if I'm running a random Spotify and it decides to play one of those songs out of order, it wouldn't make any sense.
And you'd be very disappointed when it was over and it skipped to something else instead of playing the song that was intended to follow it. It's sort of like, Green Day's Brain Stew and Jaded.
Yes.
Like you're always disappointed when Brain Stew plays and it doesn't go right into Jaded. You're like, what the hell? Like, because it's just so. Or what's the Led Zeppelin one? Livin' Lovin' Made. What's the one that comes before it? Heartbreaker into Livin'.
Just think of We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions have to be played back to back. You can't. They go together.
Yeah, so like there are just certain songs like that when they pop up on a playlist and then it skips. You're just like, no. Like, I always wish that there was like a feature in Spotify you could like bridge songs, like just say, no matter what, if you play this one always comes after it.
Yeah. Although that's been an interesting thing too, because I know you don't allow Spotify to continue playing other stuff when you're done with a record, but I do. And so when I'm listening to this record and The Marvelous Orange Tree is the last track and it finishes, it keeps playing Infinite Granite songs, which is not always a bad thing, but it's a very strange kind of record skip almost compared to finishing this record than to instantly go back to Infinite Granite.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
All right, so now I guess maybe we go a little bit track by track. What are the biggest, obviously you already talked about Amethyst being kind of the central piece to the record, and I agree completely. Just of all the songs on this record, that one seems to be the most Deafheaven of all of the Deafheaven songs on here.
Yeah.
Just the 8 minutes and 14 seconds, very much them letting loose and letting songs breathe and move and change over the course of a longer period of time and song structure format. But where would you like to go after that, do you think?
Well, I don't know. Like, I'll mention, I do think it's interesting the Doberman Magnolia part of this album is worth mentioning because it really feels like they came out of this gate. I don't know if it was Stereo Gum or Pitchfork. One of the two basically said that these two songs were kind of getting the fan service out of the way, which I don't know if I totally agree with. And I don't know if I think that might have been kind of tongue in cheek, but I will say, like, Doberman on first listen, I think was my favorite track on first listen. It's not anymore, but on first listen, because it was the most familiar to me in terms of like, it almost sounded like, I don't know, like to me, it just really like was their way of saying, look, we're back. Like, we're back to doing what we used to do. And, and it is interesting, I guess we can kind of talk about this, like this decision to go back to this kind of music. But in doing some research for this and reading a couple different interviews, the band mentioned that it really was a case of like when they did Infinite Granite, they had kind of fallen out of favor with heavy music. It just wasn't where their hearts were at that moment, and they needed to do something different. They just had to. And so they did that. But they said then they toured on the Sunbather 10-year anniversary, and they played with Knocked Loose. And they cited like those two things as like re-sparking their desire to like get back to like that aggressive sound. And so I do think like it's not a coincidence that Doberman is the first like actual song on this album. I think it was their way of really announcing like, look, this is traditional, black metal. We've got the blast beats, the tremolo guitar playing, like it's all there. But then it does break into like, there are some like, like sort of like beat drops, like heavy, like chunking, like more traditional metal style playing in this as well, like just to show like there are multiple sides to it. But I just think that was an intentional thing that they started with. And then Magnolia is probably the most New Bermuda coded song on this album. I mean, Magnolia, it was the first thing everybody said when this was the first single, and when everybody heard it, they're like, oh, okay, they're doing New Bermuda again, which turns out they didn't do. This album is not New Bermuda, but this song certainly sounds the most like it. George Clarke referred to it as Kerry McCoy's ADD guitar playing, and that riff really is like, as soon as he heard it, it clicked to me like that, because that guitar riff is an ADD guitar riff. Like it doesn't start and like loop back on itself the way you expect it to. It's like he starts doing the riff and kind of like wanders off and then goes back to it and then wanders off. It's got like that kind of effect to it. But these two songs are like really giving a head nod to show like these are maybe the most straightforward metal songs on this album.
Well, and it's interesting too, because one of the times I saw Deafheaven in the last year and a half, 2 years, whatever it was, they were opening for Coheed. And in one of the interviews I was reading how, this band has always had a bit of an identity crisis just in terms of trying to play with other bands and playing on bills and festivals. They can be invited to play at indie rock festivals. They can be invited to play on hardcore metal festivals. And when I saw them open for Coheed, it was like they were almost too heavy for the Coheed audience, but like they're heavy and they fit in tangentially, and they didn't play a lot of the Infinite Granite stuff at that Coheed show. And it was almost like the people who know Deafheaven loved it, and the people who didn't were kind of confused by it. And I just wonder, a band that's this good and is this well honed, but also this original, other than playing headlining shows for their audience, it's very hard for them probably to find a place where they just naturally fit. Like they're the only ones in their specific, very, very specific genre, although there are enough copycats popping up. And I don't say that in a negative way. But maybe someday they will be able to play on a bill of Deafheaven like black metal with an undercard of bands that won't feel like a record scratch to the audience.
Yeah, I think that kind of plays into what you were talking about at the beginning too, even in terms of like how big Deafheaven is or isn't. Like they are absolutely loved by those of us who get it. You do not hear a lot of people who are sort of lukewarm on Deafheaven. Like once it clicks for you, like you're in. And so they are really loved, but like it's such a niche thing because I don't know if I think it was Michael Nelson who talked about this. They're an interesting band because when they first came out, they released Roads to Judah, and then they released a demo EP. The demo was actually recorded first, but they released it after. They were really like in a group of what was called black gaze music. It was this combination of black metal and shoegaze. They were not the only band doing it, and like they sort of had a peer group, and like one of the big ones was Alcest, the French band that was sort of on a similar trajectory, but maybe even a little bit ahead of Deafheaven in their timing. But like Deafheaven, when they put out Sunbather, they became something that made them sort of not have any peers anymore. They became a band unto themselves. They were an island of a band. And like you said, like the iconic cover of Sunbather spoke to the indie rock world, and it really drew in a lot of the indie world. But they still had people who liked the black metal side of them. But then the question was, well, are they actually black metal, and are they betraying the spirit of black metal by leaning so heavily into some of these other elements? And they did sort of get lost in that for a while. And I think that's way back when we had a different website, and our sports website, and we would still podcast about music on that sometimes. I remember us talking about New Bermuda when that came out, and talking about how that album really felt like them trying to show people like, we can still do metal. Like we are still a metal band. And especially the way that album opens, those first couple tracks are like just really, it's sort of similar to what they did here, where they like really tried to put out a statement out top and really let it be shown that the metal chops, no matter what Deafheaven does, the metal chops are always there.
So I found the quote from George Clarke, and it almost makes me feel better knowing that they question it too. It's always been difficult to know exactly where we sit. For us, if you like our band and what we do, if you find us interesting and you'd like us to play your festival, that's flattering. We're always excited to cross those boundaries. But then he also said, I always feel energized and ready to go like we're a new band when we release something. Sometimes I wish I could be comfortable that we've been around a long time, but I can't. There are always new mountains to climb, new fans to meet. And I think that just kind of speaks to how even a band with as much material as they have and enough time under their belt, they get nervous about releasing new music because how is anybody going to take anything that they do,
Can you imagine the
accepted?
nerves they must have felt before Infinite Granite came out?
Gosh, yeah.
And George has even talked about this now. Like you pointed out, and you had been pointing this out to me for a while, that you kept telling me, look, they're not playing Infinite Granite songs live anymore. Like they would maybe play Mombasa here and there, but
I was obsessively looking at set lists, like even to shows that I wasn't going to.
And George has talked about the fact that he did feel, he didn't use the word embarrassed. Maybe he used the word exposed. It was a vulnerability he had to show in actually like using just his singing voice and not his screaming voice, which he does better than everybody. Like everybody knows what he can do with that voice. But he had talked about how he sort of felt, almost reserved singing that way. And he sort of missed being like the front man, like really stepping forward in front of that stage and just blasting that voice out in front of everybody. And I think a lot of that really led into this shift in why they stopped playing a lot of those songs live and sort of just really wanted to get back to being what they were. But I don't remember which song he mentioned it. I don't know if I have this in my notes here, but he had talked about one of the songs on this that he felt they couldn't have written that song without Infinite Granite. Like, and I do think like anything we say about Infinite Granite and how we feel about it now, which I would say, all I'll say is at this point, it is not either of our favorite Deafheaven album, but I do hear elements of it sprinkled throughout this album. And I think that's important. I don't think the Sunbather Deafheaven, that era of Deafheaven, could have possibly written an album like this. I think they had to go through all of those things to confidently write an album that has sort of the dichotomy of this album. And we'll talk about, maybe I'll just talk about that now a little bit. Like, even just in the album title, Lonely People with Power, it's really playing on multiple different emotions. The lonely people on the one side with power on the other. There's two stark differences there. And George talked about how, yes, there are political overtones to it, but he also means within the family dynamics as well, because so many of his songs are so personal about his upbringing and his family, as well as like his battles with addiction. And
yeah, he referred to this as almost a recovery album, just dealing with his addiction. And
I think he's like 6 years sober now, somewhere around there. And yeah, like I think this album was just cathartic to him in many ways. And, you know, even in terms of things like Winona being about the city, Winona, Missouri, which is where his family is from originally. Magnolia is the state flower of Missouri. Like these things are all, you know, very carefully done. None of this would have worked, this blending of the beauty, the vulnerable, and also the confidence and the just brashness of this. Like those two sides of the coin. Yes, Deafheaven has always played around with those things. You can certainly listen to Sunbather and hear them doing a little bit of that, but it's so much more of a dynamic now. It happens faster. That's flipping the switch between those two sides happens faster. There are moments like George does sing in multiple songs on here. Like his singing voice is still present, but now rather than it being the focal point of these songs, it is now just used as a texture to lead you in. It's that the quiet, loud dynamic that they play around with on this album. So all those things are here, and I just don't think that this band could have done this without having gone through making an album like Infinite Granite.
Well, and everything that they do feels so deeply personal. Even the guitar playing, everything just feels so deeply personal from this band. You know, you hear about it in other art forms with I always think about comedians, where if a comedian gets too successful, they stop living a normal life and they stop being able to relate to other people. And so Infinite Granite is an experience that gave them another perspective and more experiences with which to write from. It's like going out and living a normal life for a while or something. Maybe the comparison doesn't work perfectly, but in order to delve back into this style and the way that they did it, and the way that this whole album feels cohesive as a story, kind of. And I haven't dove all the way through all the lyrics. I don't feel like I've digested this album fully yet. It's probably going to take me another six months at least, but I can already sense the continuity of the whole thing. And you can't make a piece of art that feels this continuous and with this much continuity unless you're building off something or you've experienced something. And so I'm with you 100% about how, like, Infinite Granite, for all the things that I might say or feel about it now, feels completely and absolutely necessary. I still hear parts of it in this, and parts that improve this and make it better. It's not just callbacks. It's not just cheap callbacks.
No, that's a great point. It made them a better band, in my opinion. I think Deafheaven today is a better band for having gone through it and having done that. And, you know, they might make another album like it in the future. They might decide, you know what, we want to go back and do that again. You know, it's not to say that that part of them is just gone. And I think this album just shows that it's not. It's always going to probably be a part of them going forward. It's just really what sort of makes this album feel a little bit like a statement album in a way that maybe a lot of their albums haven't necessarily been statements. They've been more of a measure of where they were at that time. Like, you know, I talked about New Bermuda being a reaction to the success of Sunbather. Well, Ordinary Corrupt Human Love was sort of them like leaning more into the shoegaze side of it. And that naturally led into Infinite Granite, which became something totally different. And this is like taking all of those pieces and making this statement.
So it's also the most time in between records so far. I'm looking here. It's 2 years from Sunbather to New Bermuda. It's 3 years from New Bermuda to Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, 3 years to Infinite Granite, and it was 4 years. I mean, you know, 2021 to 2025. I mean, this album is thick. 12 songs. It's an hour and 2 minutes long, which in this day and age, not only are 12 songs a lot, An hour of music is almost unheard of in this kind of short attention span musical landscape we live in now.
Yep.
Bands are doing 8, 9, 10 songs at 3 or 4 minutes a piece, and you're in and out in 40 minutes or less.
So you and I intentionally did not talk about this album with each other.
You too, by the way, and you refused to tell me anything. You started to a couple of times and you stopped yourself both times.
Yep. And so the one thing I did say to you the very first thing I said to you was this album is relentless. And that's really that was my first feel about it on that first listen. An hour long 12 track Deafheaven album, and it just kept coming. It just kept coming at you and coming at you. And that's one thing that I think is actually kind of cool about this. Like Deafheaven is traditionally New Bermuda was 5 songs. Sunbather had interlude tracks, but was essentially 4 songs, 5 songs itself. Ordinary Corrupt Human Love was really only, I think, 5 songs and 6 songs and 3 interlude type pieces.
Sunbather was essentially 4 songs.
Yeah. And so I thought it was interesting. Like, I didn't know what to expect when I saw the track list for this, that it was 12 tracks, but then doing this in shorter spurts, they're still doing all of the things Deafheaven has done. These songs are showing all the sides of what they do, but they just do it in these compressed songs, and it's coming at you faster, and it just made it feel so relentless, where you're just like, God, it's just track after track after track, and it just kept coming, and you're just like, where are the down moments in this? Like, it's just this album doesn't skip a beat. Like, it is practically a perfect album. Maybe it is a perfect album. I mean, it's very early for me to say for sure if I'm going to feel that way long term, but even let's talk about the track Body Behavior. Very, very unique Deftone track. Dare I say, George Clarke almost is infusing melody into his screams in this song, which is really interesting to hear. But the other big thing on this song, and I know Pitchfork mentioned this in their review, a couple others I saw mention this, so I'm not just trying to steal their thing, but it's just inescapable to not talk about it on this song, is the bass playing. Chris Johnson has a very thankless job being the bass player in Deafheaven. He is often very buried in the mix. He's got, Kerry McCoy and Shiv Murali are both just dancing all around him with their guitar parts. Daniel Tracy is a ridiculous drummer who's just absolutely relentless. And Chris Johnson is kind of just stuck being the foundation of the songs, like being the consistent, presence underneath it all. But they let him shine a little bit on this song. Like, somebody compared it to Joy Division almost. Pitchfork compared it to AFI's. They're like Sing the Sorrow, which to me, I almost hear it more as AFI's December Underground album, like where they really went in a new wave post-punk kind of sound. This Body Behavior verges on post-punk. It's almost a post-punk song. Even like maybe a little bit of like Refused. I can even hear some Refused influence in this. It's a very...
You're right. Thematically, it almost hits chorus lines with the music, and it swells and it drops back into the verses and swells back into what would be a chorus, but not in the prototypical way.
Right.
But kind of.
Yeah. And I think this is just a really exciting song to show the potential of what they could still do yet in their future. Like there's some directions they can go that aren't what they traditionally do. Like, don't get me wrong, this still clearly sounds like a Deafheaven song, but hearing some of these other influences rise to the top, I found it almost exciting. Like, wow, like they're even capable of incorporating this much melody into what they're doing. It was really cool. And again, Chris Johnson's bass playing just absolutely shines in this song, and he actually gets to be in the forefront of the mix and really carry the melody a little bit in it, which was really cool.
Well, it's a good point too, because this is a band that is absolutely dominated by the top 2 members, Kerry McCoy,
and George Clarke.
And But this band could not be the band that it is without Daniel Tracy, the drummer. How do you pronounce it? Shiv
Murali.
It couldn't be the band that it is without Shiv.
Shiv is unbelievable. I mean, he's a very underrated guitarist. Like, it's not easy to play beside Kerry McCoy, who is one of the most unique guitar players that there is. Like, Shiv is just killing it with his parts as well. Like, he's carrying some of this.
But it would be easy to hear a band like this and say, well, you know, the other parts are replaceable, and in other bands, you know, you could swap out a bass player or a drummer. Like, I used to think, even totally different metal band, but I used to think Slipknot had irreplaceable drumming. And now they've replaced the drummer 3 or 4 times, 2 or 3 times at least. And so I was just kind of wrong about that. But I really, truly don't think that this band could exist without Daniel Tracy playing drums the way he plays them.
Drummer, just unbelievable. Like the blast beats are one thing, but like to be able to just seamlessly go from those into the other part, because again, this is sort of the genius of Kerry McCoy, is his ability to just go right from that just directly into this like spacious part that needs room to breathe. And then sometimes it's going from blast beats into like a chunky, like traditional metal part. And I don't think a lot of people maybe appreciate just how difficult that is to really keep all that perfectly syncopated and in time.
Yeah, bending styles too, because it takes a unique set of musicians who are not only capable but willing, because a lot of what you find in heavy music is kind of a monotonous style, or stylistically monotonous amongst the members, where they are playing heavy music because they love heavy music and that's what they want to play, and they only want to play it the way that they play it. And yeah, they may drop out and do different things to give dynamics or speed changes or accentuate things. But bending these styles takes a unique set of musicians who are all bought in on it. And it's kind of magical that they all found each other and they all continue to make music together.
It truly is. Like, to your point, like Deafheaven started out with just George and Kerry. And in fact, I told you,
which sounds insane.
When they recorded the demo, they I think it cost them $500 to record it, which was money they didn't even have. They had to borrow the money for it. Kerry McCoy at that time did not own an electric guitar and an amp. So he wrote that demo on an acoustic guitar with George. They had this vision in their heads of what this could sound like, but they wrote it on an acoustic guitar. And then when they went into the studio, they borrowed the studio's equipment to record it. And when you hear how dialed in Kerry's tone is already on that, like, it just blows me away that like he just went into a studio, borrowed equipment, and found the Deafheaven sound. It's just crazy. But yeah, so it just started out with just the two of them in a vision for what this music could be. And they somehow found the perfect, and them finding Daniel Tracy, especially, like, again, you and I talk about this all the time. Dylan Baldy from Cloud Nothings finding Jason, which I'm not even going to try. Gerwitz. I feel bad that I can't pronounce his last name, but like, it seems like a miracle that he found him, but like, you literally could not have Cloud Nothings with another drummer either. And I sort of see Daniel Tracy finding this band the same way. And I feel the same way about Shiv's guitar playing. I don't know how many other guitar players could complement Kerry so perfectly and seamlessly as Shiv does.
Well, and the other reason why I always tie those two drummers together is they both play on drum kits that are impossibly small. You know, It's like we're in metal where you're seeing drummers play with 37-piece kits and 27 cymbals. It's like these guys are playing a bass, drum, a floor tom, a snare, and some cymbals, and they manage to fill out the sound in impossible ways with these tiny little kits.
Yeah.
You know, while making drummers around the world feel guilty for even owning their equipment, you know. Like,
yeah, I mean, it truly, like, you know, they talk about this a lot in guitar playing, that like, it's not the gear, it's your hands, it's how you play the guitar. Like, a great guitar player can make almost any guitar sound great. And I do think to some degree, like, that's even true of drumming too. Like, yeah, I mean, gear can matter, and like, you know, you can do certain things with different types of gear, but like, a bad drummer doesn't matter what their kit is, it's not going to work. And a bad guitar player, doesn't matter how expensive the gear is, they're not going to sound that great. And so this is just a unique collection of talent that somehow found each other in this world. And yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, Daniel Tracy, I just looked. He plays a 4-piece kit. He does have a mounted a rack tom as well. And then Jason Garrick plays a 3-piece kit, you know.
Ridiculous.
Like, when you hear what these guys do, especially live, when you see them do it live and just the sheer ability to play with that level of speed and power and ferocity, because sometimes this is another thing that happens in metal, especially in the late 90s. There were a lot of metal drummers that were playing drum kits that had triggers, so that they like a supplemental sound kit, so that when they would play the bass, it would make almost an electronic bass drum sound, so that they could play as fast as possible without having to play aggressively. They just have to tap.
Yep.
That's not what's going on here. These guys are playing not only fast but ferociously.
I mean, I don't think you can get a much better cardio workout than playing drums like Daniel Tracy.
You wouldn't believe it, but he's really skinny.
Yeah, imagine that.
It'd be like, this is the dork side of me, but like, I'd love to know calories burned during a 45-minute Deafheaven
set his Apple Watch and record the workout. Yeah,
drummers are constantly putting GoPros on their kits and filming their sets. I want them to wear a Whoop band to figure out like what his burn rate is on an average set. These guys are just crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so where else do we need to go?
We got a couple songs. I want to end the track discussion side of this with the last 2 tracks, but we haven't talked about the Garden. Do you think it's Route or Root?
I always say Root.
I say Route. Anyways, say what you want. This is a very lush song. This is probably the most Ordinary Corrupt Human Love sounding song on the album to me. Like, I think this song you could almost just pick up and place on that album and it wouldn't sound that far out of place. But that was actually, I do have it here in my notes. This is the song that George Clarke said couldn't exist without having done Infinite Granite first. So disregard what I just said. You cannot just pick it up and put it on Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, because IG had to come first. But this is like, to me, this is really like, this song was sort of like where the heartbeat begins to this album. Because I do think those Doberman and Magnolia, I love those songs, but they are just them showing what like, yes, we're still Deafheaven, but this was the song where it was like really showing, okay, we're not just gonna like blast, we're not gonna just melt your faces off for this entire album. Like, we're still gonna incorporate some of these other elements that we do as well.
So one of the things that you and I talked about way back when with Sunbather was how the vocals are like an instrument, almost like a percussive instrument. And the way that they were buried in the mix to some degree, you could not really understand any of the lyrics on Sunbather unless you were reading lyric sheets along with it. And then you could kind of hear it like, oh yeah, that is what he's saying. But I was able to actually understand lyrics on this record. And it was noted in some of the interviews that they specifically, probably in reaction to Infinite Granite when he was singing clean, that they brought his vocals out front and accentuated them a little bit more, where typically in black metal and typically in their career, when he was screaming black metal screeching style, they would kind of bury it in the mix and it would be more like an instrument. And so I really appreciated, I still didn't get all the lyrics on this record, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But there were times where I was actually picking up the lyrics, and the lyrics are so great. I'm not generally a lyrics guy, but it was great to actually hear some of the things that he was saying and tie it into the context of the lush melodies or heaviness or whatever I was hearing in the moment, to understand what he was actually literally saying.
That's a good point, and this is probably a good time to mention, we haven't talked about who produced this album. Justin Meldal-Johnsen, who he played bass on my favorite iteration of the live Nine Inch Nails lineup. He played bass with them on the Lights in the Sky tour.
Also played bass with Beck. He did some M83 stuff, some St. Vincent stuff.
Yeah, he produced the M83 albums. He he's definitely dipped his toes into producing, and he did produce Infinite Granite as well. And so it's worth noting that the two albums that really pushed George a little bit more out front are ones that Justin did, whereas the previous albums had everything, including the demo, they had all been done by Jack Shirley, who is also a great producer in his own right. This is noteworthy that while Jack Shirley didn't produce Infinite Granite, he did mix it, or maybe he engineered it. I don't remember which, but he was definitely involved in it. This is the first album that they did not involve Jack Shirley at all, and I doubt that there's any bad blood there. It could be like, Pearl Jam made a lot of great albums with Brendan O'Brien, but then at some point decided they needed to work with some other people. There's certainly no animus there or anything wrong with it, and I think that's probably similar to what happened here. You just work with the same person for so long, you kind of want to branch out. But I think you made such a great point, though, in noting that when Jack Shirley was producing, George's vocals were more instrumental in nature, and I think Justin has really focused on pushing those vocals out front. And even I do think he's even sort of made the guitars a little brighter sounding than what they used to, and it makes sense when the type of things that Justin Meldal-Johnsen has done in the past. Kind of makes sense, that that's the way he would produce this. But I think it serves the band well. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. I'm thankful to have these two different sides of them. But you made a great point. It's definitely nice hearing George really be, even with the screaming, be pushed out in front a little bit more and letting us really understand what he's saying.
And going back to Cloud Nothings for a second, you and I have talked about how the production style on each of their records feels almost maybe a little bit too unique at times, where but with Deafheaven in their career so far, it's felt very continuous and very much like it's building and building and building. None of them have made me cock my head to the side and look like a confused dog. All the production just seems to fit, and it seems to fit on first listen with Deafheaven basically every time they've released a record.
Yeah. You pick out things later the more you listen to them. You understand what they're doing with some of these songs. Sometimes with Deafheaven, you may not immediately get where they're going with the songs. And again, a lot of that's because of the way Kerry writes, that you're just surprised. He tends to go in a direction you're not expecting a song to go when it goes there. So you do pick up on things later, but to your point about the production I think connects immediately on everything they've done. Deafheaven albums always sound great. I know we're running short on time. We could probably talk another hour about this. I do want to give, I feel like we skimmed Amethyst a little bit too much. So I do just want to mention, I had put in my notes here. I'm just looking at my notes that I was writing as I was listening to the album. This album starts with this really stunning slow build, and then it just swells into this massive middle section. You got these searing leads from Kerry McCoy that just cut through the emotion of the song and sort of the heftiness of George's vocals. But what I wrote here about the ending of that song is that the blast beats and black metal tremolo builds and then crashes over like a wave, breaking down into an outro that is the washing of the wave over the shore before disappearing back into the ocean. That's sort of overwritten on my part, but that was just I felt so much emotion when it got to that part that I tried to capture some sense of what I was feeling in that moment. And I just think that if I could capture one moment, one box of what Deafheaven is and what they mean to me, it might be this song right now. I don't know if this is going to be my favorite song. To pick a favorite Deafheaven song is so hard. And for me, it's always been the Pecan Tree, and it'll always be hard to really top the crushing emotional sentiment of the ending part of that album or that song. But Amethyst to me right now really is the encapsulation of everything that Deafheaven is and what they bring to the table.
Well, and the magic trick of Amethyst is how consistent it actually is, because essentially that song is a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 song. It is the most consistent beat probably across a long song, 8 minutes and 14 seconds. It's the most consistent beat in Deafheaven's entire career. It's a waltz, and still they managed to make it and huge and pretty and crush you all in one. But I think that song is an utter magic trick because on paper, it's just a waltz.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And it's like I said, like it's just this build and it builds and it just swells into this huge thing. And then it just like topples under its own weight. And like just, you just feel that sense of like falling as it releases into the outro of that song. And that's why, like, we talked about this already a little bit, but like the Incidental II is just such a relief after that. Like you just needed that break in the way that song like transitions you into Revelator.
Yeah, and I just looked the fade out, essentially they hit the last note with 14 seconds left in Amethyst. And they just let it breathe, man. They just let it breathe. And they were very comfortable letting it do that. But it's a brave choice. All right, so we should definitely finish where the record finishes. So Incidental III with Paul Blanks is track number 10, which goes into 7 minutes and 28 seconds of Winona. And then finishes off with the Marvelous Orange Tree. So I'll let you go first.
So there's a little part of me that sort of wishes Winona was actually the closer, only because I feel like it has like so much in common with the Pecan Tree and Gifts for the Earth, the closing tracks on Sunbather and New Bermuda. I think this is the zenith of the album. It's like this crescendo to the album. Plays on the dichotomy that I talked about earlier more than maybe any other song. It just really showcases the beauty and the madness, the rage and the quiet. I think the choice of this as the song title and the lyrical matter of this is really the ultimate in catharsis for George Clarke. And so in all of those ways, it sort of feels like it should be the album closer. But like, here's the thing, as much as you think that when you listen to it, when you get to the Marvelous Orange Tree, it's like, oh, well, of course that was the album closer. Like, so it still like makes sense. It's like this weird thing that I don't know how many bands can do like 2 tracks back to back that like both feel like album closers. It makes sense coming one after the other in that way.
On top of it, when I listen to Winona, I hear like a lot of that. There's a weird triumphant vibe to the guitar tone that you hear a lot in Deafheaven. I heard it a lot in Sunbather when I first listened to that one. There's just like this weird like feeling of it's a triumphant chord progression. And so it would have fit, absolutely would have fit in some weird world. I wonder if there was a way to combine those two songs into a singular 12-minute Deafheaven song.
Yeah.
But no, it's like the Lord of the Rings Return of the King ending where there's 7 endings to the movie.
Yeah.
Lonely People with Power has multiple endings and they're both good.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the theater when I watched Return of the King and my butt hurt because the movie was really long and it was like, how many times are we going to end this movie? And they ended it like at least 3 or 4 times.
Yep.
And I feel the same way about this because you're right. Winona could have finished the record just fine. And I'm not sad that the Marvelous Orange Tree ended up doing it. But it just, again, it leaves me feeling like I haven't completely digested this thing yet. Like I feel it's almost even after 5 days or however long we've been listening to this obsessively, I don't feel wholly prepared to talk about where this one's going to fit. But I feel more confident in talking about this record today than when I wrote about Infinite Granite 4 years ago, however long that was. I know I'll rethink some of the things we said on this podcast about this record too, but
this is still essentially, even though I've been listening to this nonstop for, 3 or 4 days now, this is still very much a first reaction podcast.
No.
In no way do I feel digested with this. Like I'm still learning things about it.
Would you say that this is a premature evaluation?
Ooh, I like that. Man, we should copyright that.
I think we just invented something.
Yeah. So we've got Recommendation Corner, which is ours now.
Nobody's ever done evaluation. Yeah, nobody's ever done that. We've been inventing things all the time.
Absolutely. We are pros. But yeah. Marvelous Orange Tree, Deafheaven's run of closing tracks, Exit Denied,
I just love it when bands seem to care about closing tracks as much as you and I care about them.
Yes. Pecan Tree, Gifts for the Earth. What was Lonely Animal and
You're so much better at this than I am.
I said lonely because I have lonely. Worthless Animal, Mombasa, and now Marvelous Orange Tree. Like this band, just they do not miss with what they do. And I told you, like my initial reaction to Marvelous Orange Tree was not overwhelmingly positive. I felt.
All right, now I'm going to test you.
Okay.
What did they finish 10 Years Gone, the live record, with?
It had to be Pecan Tree, right? Or did they do Dream House?
Dream House.
Okay.
So even their live record, they did it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, like my initial reaction to Marvelous Orange Tree was not overwhelmingly positive. And I don't know if
it's because Winona too much.
That's what I honestly think it was. I think it was, I was just feeling like I felt that catharsis in Winona, and I kind of, like I said, I kind of almost wanted that to be the end track. And so initially I was like, I don't know, it just seems sort of generic compared to Winona. But like, as I've had time to digest this a little bit and start to and have multiple listens, like I said, to me, it actually makes perfect sense as the closer. Like, and you'll understand, if anybody hasn't listened, you'll understand when you hear it. Like this again, it has some like actual like singing vocals on it. Then it gets heavy, and then the second part ends with just this soaring, like your typical Kerry McCoy, like this is the end of the album thing that he's doing, and it's just it's a great album closer.
Yeah. So I have no idea what this record can do for them. I have no idea what Roadrunner can do for them, but if anything is gonna take them to the maximum of what a black gaze band can do, it's this record and Roadrunner. And I'm just really excited to see how the next year or two works out for them in terms of just soaking in the success of this record and all that it should bring, because it's so good. It's just so good. It's an album that you and I needed personally, that you and I wanted personally. I hope it's the album. I hope it's 10 times that for them as a band, you know?
Yeah.
But this, when I listened to it for the first time, I just had chills the entire time. Like, I wish I could get back that feeling of hearing it for the first time over and over and over again, because it was just such a special moment to get this thing from a band that I love and to love this thing that I just got. Those things. That's why you and I do this podcast. That's why you and I are passionate about music the way we are. You know, for me, that's the itch I scratch when I go see these bands perform this stuff live, when I'm obsessively scouring YouTube for crowd shot live performances. This is the magic. And, you know, we had that last year with Dark Matter when Pearl Jam gave us a record that we never thought we were going to get. And totally different band, totally different thing, but just delivering on that wish and that love. It's just everything to me. I just love it so much.
And I don't think it's just us either. Like the reviews for this album have been pretty amazing. I think it has like an 85 on Metacritic. You know, just Rolling Stone 4 stars, Kerrang 4 out of 5, Pitchfork 7.5, which if you read their review, it reads like way better, like a way higher score than 7.5. I was surprised that that's the score they gave it based on how they read it. But NME gave it 4 stars out of 5. Guardian gave it perfect 5 stars. Michael Nelson for Stereo Gum's premature evaluation. Oh, what? Somebody else did? But he
ripped us off.
He called it unquestionably Deafheaven's best album. And I agree with him on that, by the way. I don't know where it's going to fall in terms of my favorite Deafheaven album. It's way too early for me to say. But I agree with him. I think this is unquestionably Deafheaven's best album. Like, there's just no other iteration of this band throughout that could have done this album. Like, they are just so far advanced as songwriters and musicians where they're at today that I don't know how I could call anything else a better, quote unquote, Deafheaven album than this.
Pitchfork gave Sunbather an 8.9, New Bermuda got a 9, Ordinary Corrupt Human Love got an 8.5, Infinite Granite got a 6.5, and Lonely People with Power got a 7.5. But
there you go.
I'm not ready to rank this in my all-time Deafheaven records, but I mean, I think it's easily challenging for top 3. You know, you got 5 records, and I could easily seeing it finish second, maybe first. Who knows?
6 albums, but yeah.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, sorry. I always forget about Roads to Judah.
Yeah. But yeah. So I don't know. I guess I don't have any other way to really end this. Like I said, I feel like there's so much I wanted to say about this album that I didn't even get to.
I'm sure it's not the last time we're going to talk about this record.
Very, very, very thankful that the new Scowl album comes out on Friday. Sleigh Bells has a new album coming out as well that I'm excited for, because I don't want to kill this album by over listening to it so early. And so I'm very thankful that Scowl is going to give me something to break up listening to this album, because like sometimes like when an album this early in the year comes out like this, you can almost over listen to it, and by the end of the year you're like almost tired of it, and I don't want that to happen with this. So
no,
I'll just say this is exactly this album is everything I was hoping for. When we talked a while back about our hopes for a new Deafheaven album, honestly, this is it. They delivered. This is what I hoped for. This is what I wanted. And like I said, I think I've even found out this is the album I needed.
All right. We appreciate you guys listening to the Album of Record on the podcast. We appreciate everybody who watches us on YouTube. We've got clips going up all the time on the YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe over there as well. And obviously albumofrecord.com, where we post all the new episodes so that you're in the know when a new one is released, usually every Friday. But we appreciate you guys so much and helping us grow this thing. And we'll talk to you next time. It's been the Album of Record podcast.